So today we're going to talk about an overview of the equalization application. We'll talk about the MS-1 submission, what's changing in 2020, how to data enter the MS-1, how to upload MS-1 data files from your CAMA, and how to finalize and send your values to DRA. So what's new in 2020? Two things. The Electric Energy Storage System exemption, which is RSA 7285, so that'll be added to the exemption section. And there is a revised reporting for your utility values, which include the value of distribution assets, which are valued by RSA 728D. So that's the new valuation formula for distribution assets. Then the reporting of value for other distribution assets not valued by the formula, the value for generation assets, the value for transmission assets, and the total assessed value. Now, the total assessed value is what you've always reported, and that is the only required field for this year. So a little bit different reporting on the utility values. What the most important is the total assessed value, which is what you've always reported every year, and that is the only required value for this year. So the process workflow doesn't necessarily begin with extension, but it seems like that's happening quite a bit. So if you do need an extension to your MS-1 filing, if you're not able to submit it on time, you can request an extension, and we'll go through that in just a moment. But otherwise, there are two paths that you can go. The top path is manually data entering the MS-1 form data, which then goes through validation checks. So that checks calculations and checks that you have all of your required fields have been filled in. If you have a CAMA provider that gives you an MS-1 data export, like Avatar, for example, you can upload that data file. That will prompt you to match your utilities. So the system will be looking for your utility names to match DRA's utility names. So if they do not, you'll match them up. So if you have PSNH and DRA has Public Service of New Hampshire, you'll have to match those up so that we know which utility you're reporting the value for. Then you'll go into the regular workflow of checking the required fields and calculations. And it's a two-step submission process. So you submit online, that's your e-file, but you also have to print out a copy of your MS-1 and have your assessing officials sign that. So if you're in a town, your assessing officials are your select board. If you're in a city, that would be your board of assessors or your assessor. The reason it has to be that two-step process is we do not have any statutes in New Hampshire that enable e-file on behalf of an entire board, which is what this would require. So you do your e-file submission, then print out a copy and get that signed by your select board or board of assessors. So let's take a quick look at what that looks like. Bear with me for one moment here as I bring up the application. So now all I've done is logged in, and this is our test server, so none of this data is real. Just a quick orientation, you have here all of the towns that you have access to, if you have access to multiple towns, and you have your equalization year here, so we are in 2020. Your tabs across the top correspond to these continue buttons, so in the verify tab is where you verify your sales for equalization. Today we're going to be focused on the MS-1, which is our last tab, or the continue button here. So we'll go over, we see all of the municipalities that I have access to. If you only operate in one town, you'll only see one. And you see the villages that we have access to as well. So if we look here, let's use Merrimack as our demonstration town. You see I have not started it, it's not filed. I have the option to upload my data. But let's focus on requesting an extension for now. So to request an extension, I simply click the request button. And it'll ask me for a couple of things. Why are you asking for an extension? Is it your utility values, a revaluation, other? Put in some text to explain why you're requesting this extension, and then put in the date that you're requesting the extension until. Now you can file multiple extensions if you think you'll be done by mid-September, but it winds up you're not. You can file an additional extension request to push that date back further. So that once you put that in, simply click submit, and that will go off to DRA for approval. So let's take a look at the manual data entry. So let's do it for Merrimack here. So we'll just click Start, and this is going to load up our MS-1 for us. So here's our MS-1. It's fairly large. I'm going to walk through each of the sections very briefly just to give you an idea. But to orient you, all of these sections have a blue question mark. The blue question mark is help on that particular section. Down at the bottom, we have our controls, our Save and Home button, our Save and Recalculate button, our Submit button. So this will submit it to the DRA. And then if you want to take a look at the MS-1 report, that is also available. So let's go through the section. So in our utility section, you have the question of who appraises or establishes your utility values. If it's DRA, you can put that. If it's somebody else, you can indicate who that is. Do you equalize your utility values? And then if we go through, we can add an electric utility. And here we see our new reporting. So here is your distribution reporting. So if, for example, Berlin Station, here's where you would enter the value that you valued per this new formula for valuing distribution assets. Here's where you would enter the value for distribution assets that are not valued with that formula. Then your generation, transmission, and your total assessed value. And again, total assessed is what you've always reported, and this is the required field. If DRA has set the utility value, that will appear here. So you have your gas and your water and your other utilities. If we move on to credits and exemption, you have the reporting of your veterans credits. So here you would report the amount of credit, and the range is between 51 and 750 based on how your municipality adopted it. The number of individuals that are getting the credit and your estimated tax credit. So the amount of the credit times the number of individuals gives you your maximum amount of credit allowed. So if your estimated tax credit is more than the maximum, you will get an error. So you report all your veterans credits there. Report the limits for your disabled and deaf exemptions. So for singled individuals, there's an income limit and there's an asset limit, and likewise for married, an income limit and an asset limit. So you report whatever you've adopted there. For your elderly credits and exemptions, you report the number of first-time filers in each age group, and then the total number of individuals granted the exemption by age group, the amount per individual, and the total actual granted. And as like before, the number times the amount per individual gives you your maximum allowable, which cannot be more than what you have granted. We also have an income and asset limit for the elderly credits and exemptions as well. And here we have our other credits. So the bottom two are the newer ones, the low-income housing tax credit and the commercial industrial construction exemption. So you answer whether or not you have adopted these. And then moving on into our property reports. So you report your current use acreage here, reporting on your land use change tax, your conservation restriction assessment, your discretionary easements, discretionary preservation easements, your farm structures, your TIFs, if you have TIFs, tax increment finance districts. There's only about 20 towns that do, but if you do, you simply report your TIF district name, when you adopted it, the values, put in the notes you need to, and you can actually attach documents related to your TIF. So if you have the warrant article that formed your TIF district, or if you have an Excel sheet maybe that calculates the values for your TIF and calculates the increment, you can load these here. DRA does not require any attachments. This is just a spot for you to keep your TIF documents in a central location if you decide to do so. We also have payments in lieu of taxation, and there is a couple different categories of that. You have your state and federal land, your White Mountain National Forest, and then the other two types here that you can add in if you need to. And finally, we have our summary. So who is your assessing official? List your municipal officials. So this will either be your select board or your board of assessors here. And this will show up on the signature page of the MS-1 when you print it out. So we have our land summary here. A lot of this you see grayed out, gets filled in from other sections of the form, but there are a few that you have to key in here. Your residential land, commercial, industrial, etc. Your reporting of building value, so current and prior year assessment. And on all these summary tabs, you'll see your current and previous year assessed value. This is exactly what DRA looks at, and they're just looking to make sure that the trends make sense. Obviously, this does not make sense because I haven't entered anything, so these differences are very large. So that's what they're looking at. Our reporting of utilities and timber, so you report your mature wood here. Your reporting of your exemptions here, and here's our new exemption, our utility, water, and air pollution control exemption. So you'd put in the number granted and the assessed value. And your optional exemptions. So we have a lot of optional exemptions here, and our new one, our energy storage systems down there. And finally, our total. So this is all pulled from elsewhere in the form, but this is the culmination of everything, and you can see the values that are used for tax rate. So this is used for your county tax rate. This value used for your local education and municipal tax rate. And then finally down here is used for your state education tax rate. Now you also have notes here, so if there's something going on that you think the DRA should know about, you can put your notes here. For example, if you had a payment in lieu of taxes that is no longer happening, you could put a note to just let them know that that has expired so that they don't ask you a question about it. So that is the manual data filing of the MS-1. So I'm just going to switch back over to the PowerPoint here for a moment, and we'll take a look at the data file upload. So if you do have a CAMA system that gives you an MS-1 export, you can pull that out of your CAMA system. It'll be an XML file, which is just a data file. And you can upload that into the system. The caveat is you can only do that if you haven't already started filling in your MS-1. So we already started filling in our MS-1. So we would have to delete that draft in order to have a blank slate to upload our MS-1 form data. So the only difference here is that you have to match your utilities, as I mentioned, and we'll take a look at this in the application in just a moment. So here we're uploading for Barnstead. You see up at the top, it says, well, you're in Barnstead, but your data file says that it's for Bridgewater. So it's giving us a red exclamation point to let us know that there might be a problem here. We might be uploading to the wrong entity. And then down at the bottom of the screen, you can see our matching for our utility companies. So on the left-hand side, we have what DRA knows the utility company to be. And on the right-hand side, the uploaded name is what came in your data file. So it's looking for those to match. If they match exactly as they do here, you're all set. You don't have to take any action. If they do not match, you have to pick the correct utility from the drop-down on the left. So let's just take a look at that quickly. So I will do a save and home. And this is going to bring me back to my MS-1 home screen with all the entities that I have access to. You'll notice I do not have an XML upload button because I've already started. It's in progress. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that in progress filing. Now I have my XML. So we'll go ahead and upload an XML file. I have one prepped here. So we'll click upload. So it says you're in Merrimack. The file says it's for Merrimack, so that's good. And we have all of our utilities that match. So we don't need to take any action if all of these match. If they don't match, you just need to check the correct utility, select the correct utility here so that it gets matched up accordingly. Once you have all of that done, you can apply your upload. So this is loading all of the data into our MS-1 for us. So now if we go in, all the data is loaded, so we don't have to do any data entry. Of course, you can edit this if you need to before submission, but we're all filled out here from our data export. And if you do use Avatar, I do know that they have that working. So that's how you load data from your XML file. And let's switch back over to the PowerPoint here, and we'll just have a quick discussion about submission. So when you click submit, the system's going to perform a number of checks, and it goes tab by tab. So if you have a required field that's not filled out, if your granted exemptions are greater than your maximum allowable exemptions, it will bring you right over to that section and tell you that you need to take action to correct it. Once you correct any errors that you have, you'll complete your e-file certification. So that's what you see on the upper right here. It asks for your name as the preparer, and you have to check the checkbox that to the best of your knowledge, what you're filing is true and correct. So you'll click Submit MS-1, Then you'll simply print out your MS-1 report to get the signature of your assessing officials. Again, that's your Board of Selectmen or your Board of Assessors if you're a city. And then just scan and upload the signature page. Now, DRA will have your data after you e-file it, and they can start their review, but they will not complete their review until they have that signed copy from your assessing officials. So make sure once you submit it that you get in the queue for select board or assessing board review of that, and then upload that as soon as you can so DRA can complete their review. So let's take a quick look here. Let's try to submit. So it's running all of our checks now, and we're going to run into an error because we have not completed all of the required fields on this. And here it is. We didn't put in the name of the assessor. So we'll just add that. Now we'll try to submit again. And it's once again running through all of the checks here, and we'll see if we make it through. And we did. So we would just put in our first name, our last name, phone number, and email, and then check the checkbox that we certify that this is true and correct, and click submit. So I'm not going to do that now because I want to show you the MS-1 report. Now, this is like all of the other reports in the system. Just going to take a moment to load here. So this is the MS-1 report. You're all probably very familiar with this. This looks like the form from several years ago before it was online. You'll notice it's very heavily watermarked with draft. That's because I didn't actually click submit. So this is not the version you want your assessing officials to sign. Once you click submit, that draft watermark will go away. Then we know that the values that you've submitted in the system are locked and they can't be edited. So we know that that is what your assessing officials are signing off on. So this can be exported out to a number of different formats by clicking the diskette icon. Word, Excel, PDF are the most common. If you just want to print it, PDF is the easiest to print. And again, once you click submit, that draft watermark will go away. So I'm going to switch back over to the PowerPoint here as we wrap up. Just a couple more topics, then I'm happy to take any questions if there are any. So on DRA's website, there are some help resources. Actually, if you click the help button within the application on the top right, that'll take you to help. And again, remember those blue question marks rather on each section will take you to help specific to that section on the MS-1. You do have two resources for additional assistance. You have your equalization auditor at DRA, Natalie, Cindy, or Linda. And you also have your Axiomatic tech support team. You have our support email and phone number, and you can submit tickets directly at support.axiomanh.com. How do you decide whether you call Axiomatic or whether you call your equalization auditor? At Axiomatic, we're here if you can't make the application do something that you want it to do. If you've forgotten your password, you're having trouble logging in, you're having trouble adding an electric utility, what have you. If you know what you want to do, but you can't seem to figure out how to do it, that would be Axiomatic tech support. If you don't know what you should be doing, that would be your equalization auditor. So for example, if you have a payment in lieu of taxes, but you're not sure how to categorize it on the form, or not sure if your municipality has adopted something, that would be a question for your equalization auditor. So any questions on how or what you should be doing, go to DRA. If you do know what you want to do, but you can't seem to figure out how to do it, that would be a question for Axiomatic.